Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. We welcome all of you for the today's morning program, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, and today we'll be playing the recorded lecture of His Holiness Devamrita Swami Maharaj, and the topic is Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 11th chapter, and text 17. Hare Krishna. Just 1 minute, let me play.
Bhagavate
Playing the
Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 11. Jad Bharat instructs King Rahugana, text 17. Bhratrivyamenam tadadabraviryam upekshaya jeditam apramatta Guru Harish Charanopasanastro Jahi Velikam Sayamatmamosham Brat Trivyam Enam Tat Adabraviryam Upekshayaj Jeditam Apramatta Guru Harish Charanopasanastro Jahi Velikam Sayamatmamosham Bhratrivyam Enam Tad Adabraviryam Upekshaya Jeditam Apramatta Guru Harish Charanopasanastro Jahi Velikam Sayam Atmamosham
What is that? It's supposed to be upper. Yeah, it doesn't look like it, right? So it's supposed to be what? A. Very instead of you. Okay. Upekshayadye hitam apramattata. Guru Harish Charano Pasanastro. Jahivyanikam Swayam Atmamosham.
Vaishnavis. Bhratrivyam, the formidable enemy. Enam, this mind. Tat, that. Adabraviryam, very, very powerful. Upekshaya, by neglecting. Ajeditam, unnecessarily increased in power. Upekshaya, by neglecting. Ajeditam, unnecessarily. Apramata, one who is without illusion. Guru, of the spiritual master. Hare, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Charana, of the lotus feet. Upasana astra, applying the weapon of worshipping. Jahi, conquer. Vyalikam, false. Swayam, personally. Atmamosham, which covers the constitutional position of the living entity. Translation. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. O King, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. Purport. There is one easy weapon with which the mind can be conquered. Neglect. The mind is always telling us to do this or that. Therefore, we should be very expert in disobeying the mind's orders. Gradually, the mind should be trained to obey the orders of the soul. It is not that one should obey the orders of the mind. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say that to control the mind, one should beat it with shoes many times just after awakening, and again before going to sleep. In this way, one can control the mind. This is the instruction of all the Shastras. If one does not do so, one is doomed to follow the dictations of the mind. Another bona fide process is to abide strictly by the orders of the spiritual master and engage in the Lord's service. Then the mind will be automatically controlled. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has instructed Srila Rupa Goswami, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. When one receives the seed of devotional service by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's real life begins if one abides by the orders of the spiritual master. By the grace of Krishna, he is freed from service to the mind. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 5th canto, 11th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Jad Bharat Instructs King Rahugana. Om Gyanat Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sometimes devotees say that we're sincerely trying so hard, but why is Krishna consciousness so difficult? And why is it that material desires keep raging? What about that promise that just take the Krishna consciousness and easily you'll cross over the ocean of material existence? Easily your life will be sublime. What about all that? But yes, all that is true. Struggles we have in our spiritual life, struggles we have with material desires, indicate that we need to apply ourselves more vigorously in our approach to bhakti yoga. As I often mention, and as stated in Bhagavata, we are yogis in devotion. The fact is, we are yogis. We're not religious believers. And a yogi, as Srila Prabhupada defines, is someone who uses the senses and the mind according to a predetermined plan. Just like our Krishna conscious activities. They are a predetermined plan for the mind and the senses. Sometimes we don't like that, or sometimes we think we've outgrown it. But still, the fact is, a yogi has a practice, and a yogi has a plan what to do with the mind and senses. So, when there is a struggle, it's showing us that we need to apply ourselves more vigorously in various areas of our spiritual life. Often, of course, it's forgotten that material existence is a struggle. So then why do we say, take to Krishna consciousness and easily you'll blossom on the spiritual platform? We say that because actually any struggle in Krishna consciousness is sublime. You're struggling for the real thing, and you're struggling in the real way. That is sublime. And Krishna is watching. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridesya arjuna tishtati. He's in your heart watching how you are endeavoring to upgrade your spiritual life. So when we start to think in a disheartened or discouraged way, oh, I keep trying, and the same desires are there, and the same impediments are there, we're forgetting that Krishna is right there with us. He's watching. He's impressed by our efforts. We are very impatient. We have spent countless births implicating ourselves in material existence. And all we have to do is make a career out of this short human form of life, a career in purification. So actually, from the viewpoint of eternity, or even just from the viewpoint of the duration of the material cosmos, yes, Krishna consciousness makes it so that you easily can transcend the modes of material nature. The problem is that in Kali Yuga, we like to whine, we like to complain, except about sense gratification. We don't whine and complain about that. But we whine and complain if we have to exert ourselves a bit in our Krishna consciousness or push ahead with greater determination. Ultimately, I've understood over the years that there's a fear that it'll all be for nothing. This is mode of passion thinking. Rajagun engages you in passionate activities that seem to have an immediate and substantial payoff. As Judd Bart has earlier pointed out in this chapter, the materially polluted mind creates a false sense of intimacy with the material world. This is causing havoc in our life. The Sanskrit word used is mamata, a false sense of proprietorship, that the material world is mine and I am the material world's. Like a false reciprocation. It's a kind of bhava. Actually, this word that Judd Bart used, mamata, proprietorship or intimacy. It's not like proprietorship in the sense of exactly someone owning property. It's a feeling of, it's an emotional feeling. You are mine and I am yours. Actually, that same word, those of you who read Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know that word mamata is used in relationship between the devotee and the Supreme Lord. As the devotee advances in spiritual life, she begins to develop a sense that Krishna is mine and I am Krishna's. That's a necessary ingredient in spontaneous love of Krishna. But here we see, in this chapter, The same word is used in relation to material existence. A false sense of intimacy. So this is why we whinge and we cry about, oh, why doesn't Krishna help me be Krishna conscious? Why doesn't it happen sooner? I've been trying. What's really screwing things up is this sense of intimacy with the material world. If we don't have that sense of intimacy with the material world, then you don't complain about Krishna and Krishna's process of bhakti yoga. You take that process as all in all. But because this false sense of intimacy corrodes the heart, we think that, okay, I'm struggling in Krishna consciousness, but material life, it's bad. It's bad, but it has some comfortable moments. And you don't have to be on your case so much. You can just let your senses run wild, and there's some kind of sense of identity, security, stability, and achievement. A sense of accomplishment, a sense of fulfillment, which we don't get in Krishna consciousness. All we hear all the time is you got to chant more attentively, you got to do more service, you got to purify your motives, you got to do this, you got to do that. But if you just settle back into the modes of nature, there's nourishment, there's rejuvenation. Of course, there are problems, but that's the way life is. But there is some sense that you're achieving something. There are finite things that you can see. There are, finite things like, lust, anger, greed, envy. They may not be the best things, but at least it's something. And gradually, one can work on these things and get over them without losing yourself. This is another great fear we have. I'm going to lose myself. We feel that way because we are attached to our false identity. These are the subtle things that are rattling around in our hearts. And this chapter is very effective, I have found, in pointing out those subtle things that are rattling in our heart. How the mind is causing us such bewilderment. We take it so seriously. How do you detach yourself from the mind? Is it impossible? No, Krishna explains in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, if you strive by right means, you can succeed. The right means for striving are not the mystic yoga system of previous ages. The right means for striving are the Krishna conscious practices that we've been given now. If we actually absorb our heart and our intelligence in those practices, we can see there'll be victory. So why not take any struggle, any feeling of lack in Krishna consciousness as incentive, as motivation to immerse ourselves deeper? And what's wrong with the struggle? Anyone who's worked in the material world, it's not exactly a cakewalk. It's a struggle. Why can't we give Krishna at least the endeavor, the struggle that we gave in material existence, or are still giving in material existence? If we have to give Krishna at least equal effort, if we're going to be honest, the best thing is more, but at least there has to be equal. And we can look into our hearts, look into our past, and see how we endeavored so mightily to achieve material goals. How can we give Krishna any less than that? We have to give at least equal and preferably more. So when there's a lack of, or there's some deficiency in striving to please Krishna, and everyone has an individual capacity. So what it means, generally, when we feel that we're struggling in Krishna consciousness, I tried and I still, I can't subdue my material desires. It means we're not acting according to our own individual capacity in Krishna's service. And so that lack of progress is a nice mechanism for letting us know we can do better. even though we think, oh, I'm doing my best. If we ask ourselves, we've got an excuse for everything. I'm doing my best. It's quite obvious to me. I don't know why I'm feeling like this. Why is Krishna doing this to me? I'm doing my best, if you ask me. You see? We like to ask ourselves. And then we complain. First we ask ourselves, we complain, and we blame Krishna. What Judbar is saying here is that you conquer the mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. You may remember in the purport, first Prabhupada quotes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saying, to control the mind, when you get up in the morning, beat it. Before you go to sleep at night, you beat it. That's not very attractive to the New Agers. Just beat the mind. How primitive, how repressive, how negative. It's a problem with you Hare Krishnas. You just don't know how to let things flow and just act as part of the universe, and the universe is in you, and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, if you think like that, or if you're a little afraid of this kind of language used by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, then in the purport, Prabhupada says, another bona fide process is to abide strictly by the orders of the spiritual master and engage in the Lord's service. Then the mind will be automatically controlled. And he goes on to describe the seed of devotional service. If one abides by the orders of the spiritual master, by the grace of Krishna, he is freed from service to the mind. So we have actually all the information we need here to be victorious. But it does take some effort. And what's wrong with effort? As I said earlier, an issue we have is that we don't consider struggling for Krishna to be sublime and blissful. Often we may have a misconception that, okay, I came to Krishna consciousness, now let it all just happen to me. Eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And we don't take as a benediction a chance to struggle for Krishna. We become disheartened, discouraged. That becoming disheartened and discouraged generally means we don't have the inspiring association. We're not taking advantage of inspiring association. We're not taking advantage of guidance. So therefore the mind concocts on its own. You'll never make it. You'll never achieve pure love of Krishna. You'll never hear the holy name, and you'll never be able to control your senses. Just drop it all, believe in God, and live happily ever after. If we can understand the super excellence of devotional service, if we can understand that a struggle in devotional service is blissful, if we can stick to that, gradually the nature of bhakti will reveal itself to you, and you'll be so happy as the years go by. You begin to see the veil of Maya begins to lift, and you start to see what's going on. Krishna has always been with me. Krishna has always cared for me. He's given me devotional service. Through attachment to devotional service, I can slay the attachment to my material mind. Material existence is described as Bhava Samudra, the ocean of becoming and unbecoming, the ocean of repeated birth and death. That repeated birth and death is caused by mental speculation. The mind creates a body which actually didn't exist before. But the gross body comes into being because of the movements of the mind. So in that way, the mind is a template for the gross body. So therefore, the real career of the human being is to have a program in which the mind becomes trained to focus on Krishna. That is a lifetime career. If you considered so many material skills and how long they take to truly develop, then what's so inappropriate about a lifetime career to develop in Krishna consciousness? Just like sitar players. It's such a complex instrument. The ragas are so complex. In India, the common saying is, you become a good sitar player after 7 births. Here, we have the chance to become Krishna conscious in 1 birth. But it does take effort. There's no doubt about it. It does take constant application. It's a career. So those who take things in that way, it's a career. Everything else is supplementary. According to my ashram status, I may have to earn a livelihood, this, that, the other, but still, my career is Krishna consciousness. That means practice. Membership in the Krishna Conscious Society, in its most potent form, in its most honest form, means you're dedicated to practice. You're a yogi. You've got a plan for your senses. You have a plan how to control the mind. When Vasudeva was riding with Devaki after their wedding, and Kamsa was driving the chariot, and then, as you know, Kamsa heard the voice, disembodied voice, and he wanted to kill his sister. Vasudeva began explaining to him how Kamsa is being victimized by the mind, and that mind causes changing of bodies. Vasudeva gives very, very graphic and beautiful examples about how the mind and its movements lead to another gross body. He said, just like when you're daydreaming during the day, you may be thinking of something you did when you were younger. You may be thinking of something you would long to do right now. You get so absorbed in those thoughts that you forget about your present body. Even through a daydream, you forget about your present body. And certainly at night, when you're dreaming at night, you forget all about the body that's laying in bed. So similarly, Vasudeva explains, the movements of the mind, because the conditioned soul is identifying with that mind, the movements of the mind, you could say out of nowhere, so to speak, produce a material body for you to identify with. Actually, that body doesn't exist from the absolute point of view. It has a beginning and end, therefore it has no endurance, so how could you consider it real from one point of view? But because your mind is absorbed in a certain way, a certain type of form manifests out of nowhere, so to speak. So real formlessness, nirakar, means how to dispose of the temporary material body and revive one's eternal constitutional position. In that description, during these verses in which Vasudeva so brilliantly explains the movements of the mind, Srila Prabhupada points out that for a devotee who dedicates his or her life to Krishna's service, even if at the time of death, due to the flickerings of the mind, one is not focused on Krishna, still, because Krishna is the master of the whole situation, he appears within the devotee's mind. So Krishna is not an ingrate. You perform 60 years of devotional service, 50 years, and just see the time of death, one false move and you're finished. Just see the power of my system. It's not like that at all. Krishna is a person. He's bhavagrahi. He selects and accepts the main attitude of the devotee. So we have so much going for us. But yes, we have a serious occupation at hand, dealing with the mind and its concoctions. One final point is that it's always good to not outgrow Bhagavad Gita. It is the cream of the Vedas and the yoga handbook. In Bhagavad Gita, there's so many instructions about dealing with the mind and what the mind does. So Krishna explains when the yogi gives up all desires for sense gratification, which are born from mental concoction. Now, just think if we start going throughout the day thinking, whenever some material desire arises in us, this is a mental concoction. This thing actually doesn't exist, but because of the material mind, this false creation, this thought of material pleasure, this concept of material pleasure has appeared like clouds on a sunny day. If we start to consider material desires as mental concoctions, and then Krishna says, you learn how to become satisfied in the purified self. The pure self. The pure self is not inactive. The pure self means devotional service. Krishna is explaining, when you become satisfied with the activities of devotional service, then you can be said to be situated in transcendental consciousness. Judd Bard is also describing in this chapter how the mind produces things out of nowhere. And it has its allies, the working senses, the karmendriyas, the knowledge-acquiring senses, the gyanendriyas, and the false ego. The mind utilizes these things to create such complications for us. And those complications multiply and multiply and multiply. Therefore, if we can recognize the havoc caused by the mind and deal with our mind, we'll save ourselves so much trouble. What people call economic development, political arrangements, scientific research, whatever, art, culture, it's all due to movements of the mind. The mind is so powerful, it makes life so complicated. So who has the most effective program for dealing with the mind? You won't find anything that is nearly as effective as the Bhakti Yoga process. And particularly, Lord Chaitanya has made it even more effective for this most difficult age by giving us the Hare Krishna mantra. So what's wrong with a lifetime of trying to hear the holy name? A devotee never feels that I've heard the Hare Krishna mantra well enough. Just, I need to hear more. I need more time for chanting. I need more of an effort for chanting. It's going to be like that all our life. And that is the beginning of real love, that you always feel you haven't loved enough, you haven't cared enough, you haven't done enough for Krishna. So in this way, the mamata can switch from feeling a false sense of intimacy with the material world to starting to feel indeed the reality. I am Krishna's and Krishna is mine. A mutual sense of ownership through mature devotional service. So I'll stop here and ask, might there be any questions? Archita Prabhu.
Of the movements of the mind. You were speaking earlier about giving equal struggle for Krishna as you gave in the material world, right? You said at least give as much struggle for Krishna as you gave, but it seems, especially here in California, there is no struggle. You put on your flip-flops, your shorts, your t-shirts, you go out, the sun is there. Somebody will offer you some medical marijuana, somebody will offer you some, free food at the Hare Krishnas. You don't have to struggle. You just, roll out of bed and everything is there,
But what you just described is a situation in which you have to struggle with. The California dreaming. You got to struggle with that. How's it going economically, and how's the state doing economically? A bit of a struggle, huh? So the beaches may be there, and all that, but meanwhile, economic life has become more and more an obvious struggle. So even if you think, let's just take it easy here, it's there's not that East Coast pressure. an aware devotee understands this is something I've got to struggle with. This concept of take it easy and it's all right. That's not helping my spiritual life. So yes, you just pointed out something you have to struggle with. We see that over the years, many decades here in New Dwarka, those devotees who can struggle with that California dreaming, they become very strong. And many never even see what's going on. They don't see the enemy. They never saw the enemy at all. They just get mowed down. So yeah, it's a struggle. Anything else? Yes, Vijay.
Yeah, you mentioned that as one continues on in Krishna consciousness, that the struggle is bliss. But generally when there's a struggle, it's difficult, and some people leave because it's just too much of a struggle. Maybe you can speak a little bit about it?
Yes. Srila Prabhupada once said that anything can be tolerated in good association. So if you want to see what your chances are for going the distance in Krishna consciousness, look around you and see who are your associates. Sometimes the road gets rocky, but if you have good associates, you can tolerate, you can pass over these rocky patches. But on your own, it is difficult. Then you're left with your mind, and when we're left alone with our mind, sooner or later we're going to blame Krishna. Is this so? It's just a natural material tendency. But in blissful enlivening association, you can more easily see Krishna's hand in everything, and you see that it is possible to pass over the rocky patches, and you use those rocky patches as a chance to increase your Krishna conscious skills. So without association, without inspiring association, it'll be very difficult. But Krishna asked that you have association, so how can you blame him? Suvas Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj. You did mention what Prabhupada said in the purport about controlling the mind. Mm-hmm. I think at one point it was in a translation where it said that we ignore the mind also. Mm. I guess a lot of times we tend to not be able to disassociate ourselves with the mind in relationship to our service, our life, everything that we do. And you're right, you did use the word that sometimes that language is quite harsh. As you stated, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's statement, beat it in the morning, beat it at night. And all this beating that's going on, it's like, it's kind of harsh, because sometimes we feel we're so connected that there's some validity to the mind, genuine validity. Mm-hmm. There's like suffering. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of suffering and a sense of feeling shut out or feeling misunderstood. So are you kind of like understanding what I'm saying? And there's just it almost seems like, does anybody care? Or there's but there's real validity to that. It's not that it's being sarcastically said, but there's real, the person tends to think real validity with it.
Sure.
And when we say, just get up in the morning and just beat that mind and, keep moving. It's like then the tendency to think, does anybody care? Does anybody really want to help me? I mean, just tell me beat my mind.
Yeah, it's not very California-like. It beats your mind.
It's more like New York style. Or Chicago.
Well, we have to decide, do we want to become purified or not? Whether it's California, Chicago, New York, do we want to become purified? That's the bottom line. You were referring to ignoring the mind. Yes, the purport says, there is one easy weapon. Nah, it can't be that. Easy for Prabhupada, but not for... He's talking to himself. There's one easy weapon with which the mind can be conquered. Neglect. The mind's always telling us to do this or that. Therefore, we should be very expert in disobeying the mind's orders. That's actually kind of fun, you know? Really, it's kind of fun. The mind tells you, oh, this, oh, about that. And you just say, hey, forget it, you know? Just it actually becomes blissful. The mind works out a whole program for you, you know? This is what you're actually feeling, and these are your needs, and this is how to fulfill those needs, and it's obvious to everyone. So and you hear the mind's program, and then you just neglect it. Sorry. It's like very discouraging, you know, when someone starts to talk to you and make a request, and they go through a whole presentation, and at the end you just say, not interested. It's very discouraging. Sankirtan devotees, they know this, you know, they do their best to encourage someone to take the book, and they make a whole presentation, and not interested. So therefore, we're hearing from the purport. We should be very expert in this. Not interested. Now, all right, you might call this a tactful compromise that the Bhagavata makes, I think in the 11th canto, that you deal with the mind like a rider deals with a horse. The horse starts to go on its own to the right, and the rider watches it. You know, oh, that's what you want to do. That's where you want to go. And he may let the horse go a little bit that way just to kind of know where the horse is at and understand the full scope of the horse's program. But then he brings the horse back under control. So there's another way. But the conclusion's still the same. It's mentioned, I believe, in the 11th canto that, okay, you don't have to immediately tug sharply on the reins. Bang yourself in the head. But you can get to know your mind and its capacity for illusion. Oh, that's what you're into. Oh, really? You develop self-knowledge of your own, you know, concoctions and your ability to concoct. And then you pull the reins. So these are all different techniques given in the Shastra. They do work. And, of course, we cannot overlook the fact, finally, we have our Krishna conscious program. Prabhupada worked so hard to give us that Krishna conscious program for dealing with our mind and senses. I haven't found any better way. I don't know about you, but after all these years, after all is said and done, it's still, you know, the bottom line's the same. What are you going to do with your mind and senses? Are they engaged in devotional service with a selfless spirit of sacrifice, or are they not? Krishna consciousness is it is not a very good religious belief system. It's about action. It's about what's your program for your mind and senses. It's up to us older devotees to create the enthusiasm for the younger devotees to see that this is a genuine program you can plug your mind and senses in. And it's a career. And at the end of your career, even if the mind is moving this way, that way at the time of death, Krishna will appear in your mind and take you back to Godhead. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, devotees.